Welcome to Unlocking Empowered Motherhood with Miss Leah, a supportive space for badass moms to help each other tap into our power as mothers and not get lost in the day-to-day struggles of parenting. We're so glad you're here. Hello, I am here today with Carolina. Carolina, it's nice to meet you. This is the first time we've met. We connected on Facebook, and I am super grateful that you are willing to jump on with me, and we're going to do a little mini coaching session and chat about your 5-year-old Mackenzie and what you've been experiencing with her. So I'll let you get us started and let me know and let the listeners know what it is that why you reached out to me and what you're looking for assistance with.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this discussion and hoping that it will give us some ideas of maybe what to do with Mackenzie. So Mackenzie is almost 6 years old, and she is my second child. So I have a 8-year-old boy, and then I have Mackenzie. And so at the last teachers conference, which was in November, at the teacher conference in November, my husband and I were experiencing this behavior from Mackenzie that was very explosive. She would just sort of all of a sudden melt down, start yelling at us, hitting us. And at the time, it was kind of random. It was like, where's this coming from? But when we met with the teacher, the teacher hadn't seen it in the classroom at all. And the other thing, the situation with Mackenzie in the classroom is that Mackenzie, because we're in a Waldorf school, is actually a year ahead of other kids. So every year she has to be evaluated whether she is allowed to progress into the grade.
Mm-hmm.
And she was doing well, and then in the classroom, but at home she was having these explosive sessions. And then when we got back from winter break, it started that she was having the sessions at home, at school, just everywhere, and they were just progressively getting worse. Like, one of the aspects of this was there was a lot of like sibling teasing going on, because like my son, who's actually pretty laid back, does tease his sister quite a bit, and that would really aggravate her. And she was having a hard time like expressing what she wanted and what she needed. So when she didn't know what she wanted or needed, she would start hitting and throwing stuff in the classroom and just yelling and being like really disruptive, which actually shook the other kids because she had always been kind of like a leader in the classroom. So that was sort of like, whoa, what's going on here? And her teacher was just having a really hard time dealing with her. And we're at home too. We're like really stressed out by her behavior. Like, my husband and I didn't know what to do. And, because all the methods that we tried with her, like, nothing worked. Like, we always stayed really calm with her so that it wouldn't escalate anything, but that didn't work. Asking her what's going on would actually upset her even more, because her whole issue, or what I kind of saw where she needed the learning, was when she didn't know what was going on with her. And, we've always talked a lot with our kids about their feelings and how they're feeling. So she's really aware of her feelings. But in these instances, it was almost like she was scaring herself.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point she even told me, like, Mommy, I don't know what's going on with me. I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
really, really hard, but I don't know what's going on with me. And her teacher, who she like loves a lot, she started taking a lot of things out on the teacher, just hitting her all the time. So it just has turned into this really, really stressful situation. And where we are with her today is that over like about a month ago or so, I came across a book called The Explosive Child, and where they teach you a specific way of like asking the kids questions. And that has helped a little, and helped us to kind of identify, like, oh, okay, the issues are around, like, Mackenzie when she doesn't know the answer, or when she is feeling like she's not doing something perfectly. And like
Mm-hmm.
today, I was volunteering in her classroom, and she had like a mini explosion when she felt that a child was interrupting her and that they weren't listening. She just got really upset about
Mm-hmm.
that. And that's where we are with her. So she's doing a little bit better, um, but still a lot of still a good number of explosions, especially and then, like, the explosions have kind of curbed themselves, where now she doesn't throw stuff anymore. And oh, I guess I should have said too. So there was a period that she went through where, like, when she would get upset and we would tell her, like, well, maybe you should just go and find your own space. So she had a space in the classroom up on a little loft that she would go and sit in, and wouldn't necessarily participate in any activities, but that's where she would sit in. And I can always tell when her behavior is about to start, because, like, her body just gets really small. Like, she, like,
Mm,
physically becomes small. It's really interesting to
really
just watch it.
interesting.
So,
It
yeah.
sounds like she's losing control and knows it, and that's a scary, scary thing.
Yeah.
Um, that's Thank you. That paints a really helpful picture for me to kind of get to imagine the larger picture. Can I ask you a couple of follow-up questions?
Yes, definitely.
So the first thing I'm wondering, being that you said you were seeing it at home and then it wasn't happening at school, and then after a transition, having a week of winter break or 2 weeks or whatever, then it was happening in both places. Let's just talk about at home first.
Mhm.
When you would see it start happening and you could see that the signs that she's giving you, what is the response? What does that look like? As she starts getting agitated, what are you and her dad saying in those moments to her? Like, what does that reaction look like?
Yeah, so we try to, like, stay as calm as we possibly can, so we're not fueling the situation. But it also depends, because, like, sometimes it's like, let's say, for example, she's drawing something and it's not perfect, and she starts throwing it across the room, and she's like, it's not perfect. And so we tell her, like, well, it actually doesn't need to be perfect. We don't need it to be perfect. Like, mommy is not perfect,
Mm-hmm.
so, and it makes it more interesting because you can learn for things not to be perfect. And she'll be like, well, no, it needs to be perfect. And we kind of, like, after that, like, we might not respond for a little bit. We might let her run her little circle, um with that, but we just try to reassure her that, like, it's okay to have bad feelings, that not all feelings are going to feel good, and it's all right that that's happening. And then we also try to help her, um to name it, like, are you feeling confused? Are you mad? Are you sad? So we try to also help her name what the feeling is. And what we've also just kind of learned is sometimes, like, less is more during the situation,
Mm-hmm.
and then come back to it when, like, maybe I'm dressing her at night or something like that. Then I might say, hey, by the way, I've noticed that, when you were drawing, you got really upset. Can you tell me what was going on with that?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
When
you
she's
know,
not in the heat of the moment anymore.
exactly, because, like, in the heat of the moment, it just doesn't work. Obviously,
Yeah.
she's really, she's going through whatever her body is going through. And I should also mention that an aspect of this that has been interesting is that, she has these, eczema flare-ups
Mm-hmm.
that really make her uncomfortable in her body.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that has helped is, like, some allergy medications that we've been using with her have helped her out a little bit more, because she's just always just sort of, like, just a little bit uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that doesn't help her out.
Immediately shortens the fuse. That makes
Yeah,
perfect sense. Yeah.
yeah, because she's already in the mid fuse, right? And she's
Mm-hmm.
maintaining that, and then you add in this other fuse. And so yeah, and yeah, so that's kind of how we deal with it in the moment. I mean, like, I'm a strong believer that there's no such thing as a bad child. She's a good kid. She just is having a hard time. She's like lagging a skill that she hasn't been able to acquire yet, basically.
Mm-hmm. And I think, that's pretty key is, and I love the way you phrase that. That is just a skill that she's still learning. But what I'm definitely hearing is a lot of internalized pressure. It sounds like you're not pressuring her and you're not pushing her for this perfection idea, but that is within her.
Yeah.
Who knows why? Who knows where that came from? But to me, I think you've got kind of two pieces here to deal with on the front end. And one is really focusing on there is no perfect. And even if it means kind of pointing things out to her in the world, or that you're doing, or things that are around her that are flawed, and the beauty that is in flaws, and how we learn from mistakes. And I think that is a very powerful place to come from when she's not in that headspace, when she's in a good place and she's feeling positive. Anywhere that you can point out something, that even something as simple as like in nature, like sometimes you see a tree that's been struck by lightning and now it's going off two directions, and
Yeah.
wow, now look at how amazing that is, that it kept growing. Like, deep inside, she's putting that on herself. And so I think just, having that, it sounds like you already are coming from a very compassionate place. And I think that's very important here, because what you're describing is a child who is losing control of herself and can't pull it back. And, she's not manipulating you with her anger. She is frustrated, and I'm picturing it. I remember we had a child many years ago that had that same type of an eczema issue, and that kind of thing can drive you. I mean, remember, like in the dark ages, people had syphilis and would go nuts, and like, it was because they were so uncomfortable and something was going on in their body. So I love that you're taking kind of a whole child approach here. You're not just saying, okay, well, my child just wants what she wants and she's mad and she's going to scream at people and get it. You're seeing that there is internalized frustration and even discomfort in her body. So I love that you're taking that tack. And I also loved hearing about the place she would go in school. I'm wondering if there's something like that at home as well, where she can be redirected to an area of the house where she is free to scream and yell and punch a punching bag and, emote and get all of that out, where you can sort of disconnect from her in that moment. It sounds like you approach it very gently and then step away, which I would recommend. I think that's the right move. But I also wonder if there's a way to disconnect even further when you see that she's on the edge. There's nothing you can do about it, right? She's got to blow off those feelings. What does it look like when she is done? Does she have the big explosion and then, kind of simmer down? And is she, oftentimes after an explosion like that, kids are very sort of weepy and emotional and like want hugs and reassurance? Is that what you see from her once she's kind of gotten through the big stuff, the big part?
Sometimes, let me just step back, because there's a couple things that you said that I just wanted to just kind of point out, because like I like the idea that you had around, like, when she's not in the moment, pointing out imperfections in the world to her, because I think we point them out to her when she's in the moment, but not necessarily when she's out of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then just having a place for her in the house where when she can scream and yell. The thing about that one that's a little bit challenging, she does not like to be left alone in those
Mm-hmm.
moments.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I want to give that one some more thought. So I like these two kind of helpful things. And since I went there, I forgot what your question was. So can you ask your question again?
Oh, that's quite all right. I was asking, what does it look like once the big explosion
Oh,
happens? How does it end? Like, does she
yeah.
simmer to like a a sad place and kind of want hugs and love, or what do you typically see when she's through the hot
Yeah.
part?
So this is the interesting part. It's kind of 50-50. Sometimes it's like a snap of the finger, it's like nothing happened. I mean, like today at
Mhm.
school when she had a little explosion, and then it was like she turned around, started playing with the other girl, like nothing had happened. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, this is interesting. And then like 20% of the time, I feel like maybe even less than that, she needs more comfort. Like she's still sad and she's upset, and then she needs to be held, and she just needs to be hugged basically. But the majority of the time, and this has been kind of like what I've seen the improvement in her, because um she would get stuck in these places, and then
Mhm.
it was like explosion after explosion after explosion after explosion, where
Mhm.
now it's like an explosion, she can, like a less minor explosion, she can get back into the activity, or on those rare moments she just needs a little bit more reassurance.
Mhm. Mhm. And that makes a lot of sense because and I think what I'm hearing too probably is she is with maturity and with um if you told me that every time she exploded, you guys exploded, or, the whole universe stopped and all the attention went on her, that would probably be continuing this process, right? Because then it's almost like pouring gasoline on a flame. But it sounds like you're taking a very kind of calm, measured approach, and like what I'm loving that I'm hearing is that you're not shaming, you're not making her feel bad about it. You recognize that she already feels bad. This is frustrating for her as well. And I think that, I guess the long and short of it is, I think the way that it's being handled is probably helping to lower the number of these outbursts because you're not pouring the gasoline on top and she's not getting this big reaction. Now, if she exploded and then you exploded back, or, and there may be times where she sees more frustration, whether it's from teachers or from parents, that might be something to kind of notice and document. um you know does that affect the outcome, and is that a moment where, like, if you get mad and you know what, I'm throwing up my hands, I'm frustrated, this is too much, does that escalate for her? Because yeah, they don't want to be alone, especially when they're in those huge feelings. But I think having, even if you are in the room but you somehow disconnect yourself, like the language can be very consistent. I see you're very upset. I don't think there's much I can do to help you. I'm going to let you feel your feelings, and I'm here when you're ready for me. And you can turn around, you can walk down the hall, you can focus on something else, even if it's all going on behind you. You can acknowledge her feelings, but don't get you're very clear on the fact that you can't pull her out, right? Like, once it's started, she has to have the feeling, she has to blow through it herself. And then I think that's the moment after, when she's kind of calming back down, where you say, wow, that looked really hard. Do you need a hug? Or, how can I support you? What is it that you need from me right now? And it may just be as simple as, it's so big, it takes her over. And I think there's something about, you're walking a line. You're sort of, we're minimizing the behavior by not actively getting involved in it and being brought into the tantrum or brought into the explosion. But you're there and you're her soft place to land. And you even mentioned when you said that, she loves her teacher and she started taking her frustration out on her teacher as well. That makes perfect sense. That means she's very comfortable with that teacher. And that's a great thing. I mean, it's good that she is at that. We always joke at our school, when we have somebody new, a new child, usually a couple months in, we start seeing testing and we start seeing pushback, and we go, oh, good. That means they're comfortable. That's what we want to see. We want to see that after this amount of time, they feel safe here and they know that we'll love them, even if they get really mad or even if they push back against the rules. So on the one hand, it's frustrating behavior. It's hard to manage. and it can be worrisome. But on the other hand, you're handling it, I would say, pretty well, unless, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, do you feel like there are times where it bleeds into the whole family and we're all exploding, or have you been able to sort of isolate it to her most of the time?
So the one area where we're not able to kind of isolate it is with her brother.
Hmm.
Because obviously he's 8, he's got his own little feelings, and if he starts teasing her and she kind of like starts exploding, he just goes harder, and even like separating the two doesn't work that well. And then it just like he then gets really, really upset. She's upset. So it's frustrating, and then it's like when we pull them apart, and let's say I take her upstairs, she starts this whole routine of, well, you don't love me, nobody loves me, nobody likes me, and we keep on telling her like, no, Mackenzie, we love you, you have a lot of friends, you just like, and I feel like in that respect she's kind of like, I don't feel like she really thinks that. Like just the way she says it and the look on her face is like she's
Hmm.
testing and trying to push our buttons like even
Hmm.
harder. And I mean, there are instances, and I think I've gotten better about this, where like outwardly I'm calm, but like inwardly I'm just like, what the hell?
Well, you're a human being, and
Oh
that is
yeah,
normal.
yeah, and like I do wonder, like, yeah, this is she able to like sense that, and is she like, so like it's like the next level thing that I'm just like, okay, outwardly and inwardly both calm. I mean, I feel like we have been making progress with her, and I guess the frustrating thing for me with it is like, I guess I'm getting messaging from the school that is like, it's not happening fast enough. Like, yeah, she's improving, but and like to me, I'm like, well, she's 5, and it's been since January, and it's May. So like,
Hmm.
I don't know. It doesn't seem like a lot of time for me for a child who has. I mean, I feel like has seen a lot of improvement. So that's why I'm like, okay, well, what am I missing here?
Well, I mean, you're helping her to reset these patterns. And we know as adults that resetting patterns is really hard work. That is it. You're going against your instincts. You're going against what has worked for you in the past, or what you perceive is working for you. And, or, when I say you, I mean she. And so I would certainly ask the school for some grace when it comes to this, because you're taking steps and you're doing everything that you can. But I can also see that if you're hearing that the school is concerned that it's not happening fast enough, that is stressing you out.
Yes.
That's probably stressing dad.
Yeah.
That is what she's going to feel, that stress and that tension. So a lot of what I end up talking to parents about is these, almost all of these types of problems, right, are phases. They're lessons that are being learned as we speak. She hasn't quite figured out all those tools yet, but this will pass, this will end. And you, from what you've described, it already is shifting. It's already, the volume has lowered, and that's great. You're going the right direction. So I would like to first say to you, it's going to be okay. And you might need to tell yourself that a lot, and remind yourself that this is not out of the realm of normal behavior. This is a child that probably does run hot. Sounds like even her skin is hot. Some of us are, I am this way. When I get mad, I turn red. My chest gets red and my cheeks, and you can't hide it. But I think this is partially just who she is and how she runs. You mentioned your son is a little more laid back, and that's really common to have the first one be kind of more easygoing, and the second one, it's like, whoa, where did you come from? Okay, we've got to relearn how to parent, because it's such a vast difference. And I think there's also something to be said for including your son in being some of the solution here. Maybe, kind of educating him and bringing him into your mix of, I know it's fun to tease your sister and people tease their siblings all the time, but do you recognize that it's so hard for her to stop, when she feels this way and trying to bring him almost on your side as part of the solution. It's not perfect. He's 8. He's going to tease her, and she's going to have to learn to roll through those feelings. That's going to just, you know, we can't have a coaching call and figure out how to make all this stop. Like that's just not real life. But I think it's more about the approaches you're taking and the internal way you're looking at it. I think your approaches are very reasonable, but clearly this is worrying you. And if she's picking up on that worry, it's what you described her saying, you don't love me and you guys don't like me and all of that. That's insecurity. That's her recognizing, hey, I'm screaming and yelling at people who love me and I want to make sure they still love me. And your response can be nothing but, I understand you're really mad. I still love you. I love you all the time. I love you when you're mad. I love you when you're sad. I love you when you're happy. I love you all the time. And just like no more than that. No negotiating. No, you hit the nail on the head. When she's in that space, it's like somebody put, a weighted blanket on her body and she can't get up. She can't lift out of that until she's ready. So I think some of it is really just acceptance and saying, I hear you. I acknowledge your feelings. Sorry, it's so rough for you right now. I love you. I'm going to be over here. And when you are ready, like not screaming at me, I'm here. I'll hold you. I'll hug you, whatever you need. And even in, the resolve with brother, when he's poking at her and it sets her off, when she's back down to earth again, that's the moment to say, all right, son, we're going to go over there and check on your sister. And let's just give her some love. Ask her what she needs, let her know, we're going to treat you differently. And if he's sorry and if he means it, he'll say that. I generally have a policy against making people apologize because usually if they're sorry, they will apologize on their own. And if they're not, it's sort of empty words. But we like to, have someone help the other child, and maybe he can come get her a glass of water or, have him help be part of the solution. You're not going to stop them from sibling arguments. It's just, that's never going to happen. But is that making sense when we're talking about that stress, especially when you're getting it externally from teachers or the school? I mean, it makes you feel as a mom, like, what am I doing wrong? And should I be doing something differently? And it sounds to me like you've done research, you've tried lots of things. The things that you're doing that are working the best are really allowing her to feel her feelings and not being judgy or shaming about it. And that's hard work. So, I mean, I pat you on the back for that. That is not easy, especially in the moment when you just want to yell and scream back and go, you know what? I feel the same way, And I don't know, are either of you or her dad that fiery type personality too? Like, do you
the
have to?
fiery one. The
You're
dad
the
is
fire
the
one.
dad. I'm the fiery one, and she's definitely fiery one, as well too. And I guess like I see so much of myself in her, and I think there's also this layer of her being a girl that like society expects girls to be a certain way, and
Mm-hmm.
especially little girls when they don't fall into that, and that was me. I mean, like, and even in my career, I was typically the only woman in the boardroom, so like I'm so sensitive to this fact of her that like, oh, she has this expectation of being this perfect little girl at a tea party, and that's not my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So like that just kind of like some of it I feel like that's what I'm just like fighting is just like society's expectations, because I feel like if she was a boy it still wouldn't be acceptable behavior, but not to the degree that I feel like is being put on me now. So
Mm-hmm.
like
That's
that.
probably fair. I think that's fair, and that's something that we see a lot, especially. I think when we were raised in the 80s and 90s, we were taught to be polite and quiet and you know and calm and not rock the boat. And boys were not necessarily told those same things. They were allowed to rock boats and they were allowed to be themselves and take up space. And I think, if you look at yourself and the way that you're self-describing, you sound like your fire got you some places, right? Like you were able to channel it. You wouldn't be where you are if you didn't have that. And so I think there's something too about like looking internally yourself and appreciating that fire in yourself because you need it and it has gotten you where you are in your life. And you're accepting it for yourself and you're accepting it on her behalf. And the more that you can bring that, I mean, while you're talking about imperfections in the world, you can also be saying, yeah, you know what? Mom gets mad too. Here's what I do when I get mad. And, like, here's what works and here's what doesn't. Like, relate with her because you are her. You're just more controlled, and you can sit internally, be screaming in your head, but externally staying calm, like in those board rooms. I'm sure there's been times where you wanted to say a lot of things you didn't say, but you were able to control it because you're an adult and you have more impulse control. But this is all just part of her learning. And the more that she sees, you know what, it's okay to get mad, but it's not okay to hit and hurt people. And those are the firm boundaries that have to be drawn, right? Like if she's yelling and screaming, you can say to her, I'm not going to let you scream at me, but if you need to scream, go scream. I'm not mad at you for having feelings. Go in the backyard, scream it out. You're in Davis. It's pretty rural out there. Nobody's going to get bothered. Get it out. That's totally fine. I think when we try to suppress them, that's when we really are pushing a chain and kind of running into the wall. You're not going to be able to suppress who a person is, and we don't want to. So I don't know. Is that landing? Is that making sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want to suppress her because, like, I always think it's like the irony of like, we want to raise these polite girls, but then that gets them into trouble because, later on in life, instead of like, when somebody does something to them, they just smile and take it instead of being like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, back off. Where Mackenzie is definitely a type, she'll tell them, she'll like, no, you can't do that to me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I see that and I really appreciate that about her and about myself too, because it's like, no, we're not gonna put this up with this bullshit. And then like the importance, like her dad and I have been trying to model things like when we get frustrated, like we'll say like, oh, I'm so frustrated, I'm just gonna go and sit down right now and try to figure this out. So like we're trying to like model for her like, okay, this is what frustration looks like. It doesn't have to be throwing, hitting, and fighting. And I do feel like, like today, when I was sitting down with her and she has a dance recital today, and I haven't seen her costume yet because they're trying to hide it from us. And I thought she had told me one color, and I was like, "Oh, you told me such and such color." She goes, "Oh, mommy, I was wrong about that." And I was like, "Wow, she just said she was wrong about something," which was like language I never heard her use and get upset,
Mm-hmm.
So like in my mind, like I'm like I see these little things and I'm like, okay, she is making progress. I feel like, and even like discussing this with you, it's like that the expectations on the other side might just not be as realistic. It's like it's the constant societal thing is we just want it overnight, and she is
Mm-hmm.
5, almost 6 years old, and that's not gonna happen. It's gonna take a little bit of time for her to do this, and we're gonna have to continue working with her. I think it's just an everyday kind of struggle kind of thing.
And the consistency is so important. So if you have figured out some of the things that are working at home, you just might need to share that with school and say,
Yeah.
here's what you do. When she blows up, turn your back, let her know you'll be here when she's done screaming and move on. If she needs to sit outside and get it out while if it's disruptive to the classroom, okay, let her be outside or let her be in a different space or in that loft or wherever, and give them that direction because you are taking steps to improve the situation. And you're right, it will not happen overnight. And this is also who she is. And, you want her to be loved and accepted as she is. And I know this is like difficult behavior in school, but also that's what we do in school. We deal with all different kinds of behaviors, and we don't just get to turn our back on a kid and toss them aside because they're they don't fit our mold. I mean, she might grow up and run that school one day. It sounds like she's going to be. You said she was already a leader, you know. My personal belief is that a lot of our little girls that have these big, big, big feelings, they're just ready for more than the world is ready for them to take part in. Like she wants to take over this whole world. And maybe one day she will. Hopefully we'll vote for her one day. But in this moment, she's still in this little body and doesn't have control. So that would be one other kind of avenue I would consider walking down with her, is ask yourself where there are places in life that you can give her some more control. Choices that you engineer, whether it's, on Tuesdays, it's going to be your night to pick dinner for the family. You get to pick between chicken and whatever.
So I do that, but I actually stopped doing this because she'll be like, "Mommy, I can't make a decision. There's too many choices." And I'll give her like 2 or 3. I didn't give her like, she just like, and I don't know whether that goes back to like she's afraid of like making the wrong choice, even though there isn't a wrong choice, if that makes sense. So like that
It's back to that internalized pressure. She's pressuring herself. But to me, that's a reason to put those options out there more often. And you can say, would you like to choose dinner on Tuesday? If you do, it's between chicken and steak. And she might say, no, I don't want to choose. It's too stressful. Okay, then you don't have to. But I want you to know you have some choices here, and maybe after a couple times, she'll say, yeah, I do want to decide. But keep them minimal and keep them to, 2 options that you're comfortable with. But I think, when it comes to like dressing yourself or, picking out your clothes or any of those places where you can let go a little and let her be in charge, she needs it. She needs to be in charge of some things. She can't control her brother and him poking at her. She can't control her internal feelings. She can't control her eczema. She can't control when she's frustrated. So feeding that in healthy ways, and then even pointing out, hey, I'm so glad you picked that chicken. That was a really yummy dinner. Thank you for being part of that with us, and giving her that on the other end of it. I think there's, and especially when kids are having issues, behavioral issues at home and at school, you got to figure every time she hears her name called, she's probably on the defense. She's probably ready for like, oh, I'm in trouble. Somebody's talking to me because they don't like what I said or how I said it. Or, so, it's very common for our little friends, especially our friends with big feelings and big personalities, to get pigeonholed and to, have assumptions made about them. And I think just continuing to stay compassionate, I really feel like I don't have a lot of, I think you should do this differently. I think it's more about, I want you to recognize that you're doing a lot of good things for her. And maybe you could just take it some more steps forward by pointing things out when she is in lucid moments. Once she's in that explosion, just get out of the way, let it happen. You can't stop a runaway train. And that's not for you to do. She's got to move through that. But the fact that you're seeing fewer outbursts as time goes on tells me that she's not, you're not feeding them. If you were feeding them, they'd be happening every 10 minutes and you'd be ripping your hair out. So you're going the right direction. But yeah, I mean, I think to kind of circle back, I think as much as you can relate with her and make her understand that, you know what, I get it. I get mad too, and sometimes I get so frustrated and there's nothing I can do about it. So I understand you, and there's nothing wrong with you. She's a passionate, powerful little person, and she doesn't have a lot of power in life. So it's frustrating when you don't have anywhere to take those feelings. But like I said, one day she's probably going to be like CEO of some Fortune 500 company, or she'll be doing something big and, using that power for good. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. I love to be able to say, here's the list of things to do, and they'll stop. But I really recommend you advocate for her in the school and let them know, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what works. We need some time to work on it. And if you guys want some help, let me know. And I can give you some tips and some pointers based on what you've been doing at home.
No, No, it is helpful because sometimes, like you said, you don't necessarily have like, oh, do change these things. A lot of them. I think you pointed out some things that I'm going to incorporate. But sometimes I think as a parent, you just kind of need reassurance that like, okay, you're on the right track. Now
Yes, a hundred
this is
percent.
gonna work out. This is just a phase. This is just something you got to go through. And I also strongly believe that I got these children because they're here to teach me something, and I know it
Mm,
takes patience.
yep.
Because I don't have any. So it's been a learning and a journey, and you know I think like we're in a much better space than we were like a month ago, where I feel like my husband and I were just tearing out our hair and just upset every single day. Where now it's like, okay, it's happening. It's all right. I mean, we're in a much better space with this, and this was just helpful to just kind of reassure me that we're like on the right track and we just need to continue and be consistent with what we're doing.
Absolutely. The number one thing I hear parents say is we've tried everything and nothing works. And I always say to them, pick one thing and stick with it.
Yeah.
You can't try everything. There's no consistency there. So if that method of getting out of her way and letting her have her feelings and circling back and talking to her in lucid moments and guiding the teachers, and then also adding in this piece of giving her some power and some control in other spaces and other ways, and feeding that need. We always look at my schools, we always look at what is the need of the child. And her need right now clearly is some power and control. And there are things you can do to give those to her that are healthy and safe for her. But we worry, I think, when we have kids that have these big feelings, we're afraid if we give them too much power, they're going to like take over our whole house and all of that. But it's engineering the choices and making decisions about, what can we let go and what can we give her to choose, and accepting that there's nothing wrong with her. She's probably going to be a fighter in life, and we need that. The world needs young girls to grow up and be powerful women. We need that. They need to save this world for us. So, no pressure or anything, but I'm sure that's going to be that's her job. We're going to need that from her. So anyway, well, thank you so much for being so open and so vulnerable and just honest. And I would love to circle back with you maybe in a couple of weeks. I can just ping you on Facebook and we'll check in and see how things are going. And also if there's any support I can give you around the school piece offline, if you need help talking with them or something, I've been on their end of it many a time. And personally, I love when parents come to me with solutions, because most of the time the school is going to the parents saying, we're seeing this, we need help. But if you're coming to me and saying, hey, we've been dealing with this too, and here's what's working for us, we would be thrilled to hear that from a parent. So definitely feel empowered to go take your thoughts to them and ask for what you need. She needs some time.
Yep.
It's hard work resetting patterns. So
Definitely.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carolina. I really appreciate it. It was really nice to meet you, and we'll circle back soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.